Two horror worlds, one haunting legacy. Little Nightmares redefined what atmospheric horror could be. Delicate, eerie, and unforgettable. Now the original minds behind it return with REANIMAL, a darker, more twisted version that pushes those same fears to the edge. But the question remains, can REANIMAL capture the same magic, or has it evolved into something even more terrifying? I've played Little Nightmares 1, 2, and even 3. And just to be clear, we're not comparing these directly. We are only comparing Little Nightmares in this video. That being said, I've been a massive fan of this style of horror for years. I even cosplayed as Six live on Twitch back in the day. So today we're putting Little Nightmares Enhanced Edition up against the REANIMAL Demo to see how they stack up. The demo's only around 30 minutes long, so we don't have the full picture yet, but there's already a lot to unpack here. And hey, if you love atmospheric horror, deep dives, and comparisons like this, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss more breakdowns like this one. Alright friends, let's dive in. Little Nightmares first launched back in 2017, developed by Tazar Studios and published by Bandico Namco, and it very quickly became a modern classic in horror storytelling. What made it so special wasn't the jump scares or the gore, it was the tension through silence, the contrast between a tiny fragile protagonist and a huge oppressive world, and the way it told its story without ever saying a single word. It had this like almost storybook innocence, soft colors and childlike wonder, but beneath there was something far darker. Every moment carried this uneasy feeling that something was really deeply wrong. It blended the innocent charm of a fairy tale with very adult themes, such as fear, survival, gluttony, and control. And that's why Little Nightmares hit so hard. It wasn't just a horror game, it was a metaphor wrapped into a literal nightmare. The result? Massive critical success, millions of players, and a fan base that's been desperate for something that captures that same eerie magic. When people talk about Little Nightmares, one thing that they always come up with is sound design, and for good reason. It didn't rely heavily on dialogue to make you feel something. Instead, it used the absence of sound just effectively as the presence of it. The game built tension through its silence. You'd hear a faint creak of the wood, the echo of your footsteps, or a distinct scraping in another room. And when the music did appear, it was often at key story moments. Even during the boss encounters, Little Nightmares would heighten the fear by weaving in ambient tones and a heartbeat like pulses, pulling you right into Six's panic. REANIMAL, on the other hand, takes the same philosophy and turns it up several notches. It's bolder, louder, and constantly playing with layers of environmental sound. The developers clearly want you to feel every second. Where Little Nightmares would give you some silence to think, REANIMAL fills this space with unease. It's like they took the DNA of the Little Nightmares minimalistic design and evolved it into something, well, more cinematic, more chaotic, where even the quiet moments in REANIMAL feel alive with dread. The result is an experience that's not just unsettling, it's epic in its intensity. One of the biggest differences in Little Nightmares and REANIMAL is how they use the camera. It completely changes the experience. In Little Nightmares, the perspective was a mostly fixed, tight side-scrolling view, and it always kept your character visible. You had a sense of control, and even when the world towered over you, the framing gave you distance. You were an observer inside the nightmare. REANIMAL throws this all out. The camera is here. It's alive. It's unpredictable. And it's one of the most effective horror tools the game uses. Right from the opening boat scene, the camera begins to disorientate you. It cuts in and out and shifts its perspective. It tilts. It shakes as if the lens is panicking itself. It doesn't just show you the world, it makes you feel it. And that opening sequence alone could be studied in how to build tension purely through camera work. Once you start playing, the camera follows you dynamically, hovering behind your character, but never staying still for long. It will suddenly pull back to wider shots, leaving you feeling vulnerable and exposed, and then zoom in tight when danger creeps close. It's almost suffocating with its proximity. These subtle movements aren't random. They mirror your anxiety, and when you think things are calm, the view opens up, and when tension rises, it closes in. And sometimes just when you think you're safe, it'll pan out, creating this like dreadful feeling that something's watching you in the dark. It's rare to see a horror game use its camera as a part of fear, but REANIMAL does this flawlessly. It takes the visual language we loved in Little Nightmares, modernizes it into something quite cinematic and reactive. So comparing it, it's completely different, but for good reason. And I'm sure people will love this change to REANIMAL. Little Nightmares to me has always felt something like a storybook nightmare, in a world that looked innocent at first glance, but where every corner is twisted that innocence into something horrifying. The art style is almost toy-like. The rooms look handcrafted, the textures look soft. But of course, there were 6 in her bright yellow raincoat, a burst of colour that always stood out against the muted tones of them all. Visually, it was light, not just in brightness, but in spirit. You could see the beauty in the horror. It lulled you into a childlike aesthetic, and only to remind you how dark the world really was. And that's what made it so unique. Dark themes wrapped in a soft visual. REANIMAL, on the other hand, completely flips this balance. It dives headfirst into dread. Everything about its presence is heavy. The palette is drenched in greys, shadows, fog, and decay. It trades its whimsiness for realism, softness for suffocation, and you can almost feel the weight in every frame. There's no yellow raincoat. There's no visual comfort. Instead, everything blurs together in its oppressive haze. It's honestly so grey, yet that's exactly what makes it work. It builds this atmosphere of pure horror where every light feels earned and every shadow feels alive. This tonal shift makes Reanimal feel like Little Nightmares has grown up and stepped into pure terror. It's no longer the dream that you were trapped in, it's quite literally a waking nightmare. Doesn't even try to hide its darkness behind childlike wonder. And while we've only seen 30 minutes of the demo, the contrast here is very crystal clear. Visually, the difference between Little Nightmares Light and Reanimal's Dread is night and day, literally. It's one of the most striking evolutions in the tone we've seen from the lineage of horror games. One of the things that made Little Nightmares so beloved was its simple but clever puzzle design. The balance of trial, error and tension. Every lever you pulled or the box you pushed came with a quiet dread. What's about to happen next? The puzzles were never overly complicated, but they were immersive. They relied on instinct and observation rather than flashy mechanics. In Reanimal, the same philosophy carries through. The demo doesn't try to reinvent the formula, and honestly, it doesn't need to. The puzzles so far are familiar, intuitive, and perfectly paced, sitting right in between the sweet spot of tension and curiosity. They ask you to time your actions, pay attention to the environment, and sometimes coordinate if you're playing co-op. So far, there's not a massive difference in how the puzzles or gameplay function, but that's not a criticism. It's actually a compliment. Reanimal knows exactly what worked. Rather than changing it for the sake of change, it just redefines it. So after playing the Reanimal demo and diving into every detail, from its sound and visuals to its camera work and gameplay, it's clear that this isn't trying to be a copy of Little Nightmares. It feels like a spiritual successor, but one that's evolved, darker, heavier, and more ambitious. The heart of Little Nightmares is still there. That uneasiness, that quiet fear, and that feeling of being small in a world that's so much bigger than you. But Reanimal takes this and amplifies it in every way. It's not just a new nightmare, it's a different kind of horror entirely. And if this is only 30 minutes of what's to come, then I think we're in for something really special when this game fully drops next year in 2026. But what do you think? Do you prefer the quiet storybook horror of Little Nightmares or the dark cinematic edge of Reanimal? Let me know in the comments below, as I'd really love to hear your thoughts. If you've enjoyed this comparison and want more deep dives like this, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to stay up to date with all the atmospheric horror, survival, and beyond. Thanks so much for watching, pals, and until next time, bye!